How's it going, everyone? This is Ryan O'Hara from Seven Figure MSP, and I'm joined today by Ryan Ricciardi from SaaS Alerts. Today, we're going to talk about cybersecurity for the other 61%. I'm a big fan of SaaS Alerts. I think it's a great platform. I think there's a lot of good stuff to talk about here. So I'm excited to see what you got. One of the big things I think, and why a product like this is so important, in my MSP, we have used and heavily utilized Microsoft 365 and Intune. I think that type of infrastructure is the way of the future. And I'm seeing so many more MSPs who are going down that route, which makes a product like yours so much more important. So I'm excited to see what you got today.
I appreciate it. And I actually ended up at SaaS Alerts for a very similar reason. I left the job. I know we're being recorded. I'm going to say this anyway, that I could have shown up drunk and punched somebody and not gotten fired. To the SaaS Alerts, because when they came up with the idea, I was like, there's nothing else that really does it exactly this way. And when I was in a previous life, I worked in the Marine Corps and the Federal Aviation Administration, and I had a B-billet for network admin in the Marine Corps, and then I worked safety and operational standards in the FAA. And for all of the failures of federal government as far as like scheduling and planning ahead, they took a very user-based approach to their security versus endpoint-based. They didn't particularly care what system I logged into, as long as the CAT card that I used, it was me, and I was authorized to be on that system. Didn't care where I was. That's what they focused on, user behavior. So doing that in the MSP space seemed critical, and no one else is really doing it. So I was very excited, and SaaS Alerts has been killing it in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I think there are some companies out there. I've known a bunch of different managed SOCs that use similar type of products. I mean, what stands out for me is that you guys are able to alert on so much more than what I've seen from a lot of other vendor partners that do this type of thing out there. It's you get kind of the basics from most places where it's like just, the login type behavior, but some of the alerts that you guys are able to provide through your platform are give you a whole lot more context behind some of the behaviors and warning signs and red flags to kind of look out for that might give you more information and add even a ton more value for your customers.
Yeah, I agree. And I know there's some stuff in this presentation that I'm going to get to, and I don't want to step on myself too bad. But a big part of it comes with the fact that we don't just monitor M365, and not to disparage MDRs or SOCs. The vast majority of them don't have global admin creds into these SaaS platforms. So the very best they can do is let you know something bad happened. Whereas SaaS Alerts is designed to actually automatically respond to known threats without a person being involved. It's a huge differentiator.
And that thank you for the reminder of that too, because that's a really big piece of your platform and a relatively new one that you guys launched middle of last year or something?
Yeah, I think August was the GA.
And what I really like about that platform is that it's so customizable. I mean, the rules that you can build, and I don't want to step on your toes either. But the rules that you can build with that respond module are just incredible. You can really customize it either for your stack and your MSP, or that specific client incidents to really balance that stuff out and kind of cover your own butt as an MSP to make sure that you've got these things being handled, even if you're sleeping, right?
Yep. You can get even more granular, and I can't share way too much on this call because we have a product release that's partner exclusive on April 19th. But the respond module is about to get infinitely better.
Nice.
As well. So I'll tell you about it when I'm allowed to, or when we're not being recorded, right?
Fair enough.
All right. You want me to get into this thing? It's not very long.
Yep.
All right. So you already did an intro for me, and I do truly appreciate that. My name is Ryan Ricciardi. I am the VP of Partner Success at SaaS Alerts. Which typically means, and if you take this with a grain of salt or just try to figure out who you're talking to, I'm not in the sales group for SaaS Alerts. I typically deal with our partners who are already on the platform and help with adoption and growth and understanding the product. So you'll notice that there isn't really a call to action at the end of this thing, so much as you guys should know what's out here, what we can do to help, and how we can make your MSP more successful, and you do with that information as you will.
And that makes this webinar even more interesting to folks, because now they're getting educated and not sold, right?
Right. Well, I hope they look at it that way. Yes. So I'm going to start out with a quote, because the format of this specific PowerPoint that I downloaded from Slides Carnival said quotes are super impactful. If any of you guys know who Bruce Schneier is, he's an author of the book Data versus Goliath, which is actually a really good book, and a cryptographer. And he makes the statements that amateurs hack systems, professionals hack people. It's just the world that we live in today, and that plays into my subject there. This is for the other 61%. So by the numbers, what he's referring to is the fact that 61% of breaches are identity driven, and that's going back from 2022 to current. So if you're looking at things, it's not to, again, I'm going to say the word disparage again, not to disparage the way that a lot of MSPs have looked at things for the past 15, 20 years. If you're focused on endpoints, you're missing a very important part of security, because we don't live in a world where everybody goes to an office and there's a server between them and the rest of the world, or that they, everything's got an agent and is always connected to the same network. So I can check my email from a Samsung smart fridge. I can't put an agent on that thing to make sure I'm monitoring its behavior. I have to make sure that the person that is touching it is the right person and they're at a location that they're supposed to be in. So we're down to user behavior anomaly over just endpoint detection and response as the critical new thing.
And Ryan, I would also add, I don't think that's disparaging anything at all. I think it's just important to point out that there are other pieces out there that you need to be aware of and you need to be monitoring.
Right. I'm not saying throw away your EDR, and I want to make sure that's very clear. I'm saying we've already put bars on those windows, but a lot of us are leaving the front door unlocked by not focusing on what users have access to things. And to that end, there's been 19,954 reported business email compromise cases with $2.4 billion lost in the year of 2021 alone. At the same time, ransomware had 3,700 some odd, with a significantly smaller amount. I think it was 53 million lost, according to IC3. So we've just seen a massive ramp up in this because there are ways to remediate ransomware now. People have figured out the importance of immutable backups and offsite copies, and putting things in place that actually roll back the behavior of ransomware. So just like anyone else would, attackers are taking the path of least resistance.
On top of the fact that we're seeing more and more people not paying those ransoms. So when you're not paying the ransoms, they're left holding the bag. But something like a business email compromise, they're taking the money from you. They're not waiting for you to make that decision. So that's a lot more lucrative.
Business email compromise is 64 times more profitable than ransomware to an attacker, with 84% of businesses having experienced one since 2021. They don't have to wait for you to give up and give them your stuff back. They're just going to take it from you, or they're going to trick one of your partners into giving it to them by saying, hey, you never paid this invoice. Here's the banking information, go pay it. And they do it. We actually had a partner who was trialing out and kicking the tires on the idea of using the Respond module, but hadn't enabled it yet. And I know I'm bearing the lead here because you guys don't know what the Respond module looks like. But they actually had somebody trigger, send an alert, or send an email out and say, hey, you need to pay this invoice. And the CFO of a company paid it. So now they're in the process of trying to get that back. It's $18,000. So if any guesses on what they've done with the Respond module and SaaS alerts since, it's enforced.
It got turned on the next day.
It did. So here's an important part to this as well. Like, as you mentioned, this is not just on the end users anymore. The SaaS applications that you guys are leveraging, they're aware of these threats. And if you're not surprised by this next slide, well, you really shouldn't be. Microsoft is well aware that business email compromise is a big thing. And there's lots of attackers. So they did exactly what you would expect Microsoft to do, and they protected themselves inside of their terms of use. So last year they added that. This is obviously my emphasis. If you want to find this yourself, you can go just Google Microsoft terms of use, get to that page, scroll about 2.5 feet down, and in little tiny letters, you'll see Microsoft will not be liable for any loss that you may incur as a result of someone else using your password or account, either with or without your knowledge. However, this is new. You could be held liable for losses incurred by Microsoft or another party due to someone else using your account or password. So all they did was they absolved themselves of blame and placed it right at the feet of their users, saying, if this happens, somebody's going to sue you, not us, because it's your bad security practice. It's a little alarming, and I'm going to keep saying this until people stop acting surprised when they hear that this is what Microsoft does.
And not just Microsoft, though. I mean, the not bolded part there is typical for most terms of service for software applications that you may be using. Nobody ever reads that type of stuff.
It's too long. They do it by design. 18,853 words. Who's going to read that?
Exactly. And we talk to people all the time like that, oh, we're good. All of our applications are in the cloud, right? Well, that doesn't prevent you from getting hacked on the endpoint level necessarily and somehow giving up your credentials. If they're just logging in with your credentials at that point, there's no liability on that SaaS application because, they didn't do anything wrong, right?
Right. And the mentality is accurate in one regard. When people say we're good, all of our stuff's in the cloud, that means you're good on uptime. You're not going to get more uptime than you are running off of a SaaS application, being in Azure or AWS. That's the best possible thing you can do. But that also does nothing for security. It really doesn't. I mean, we actually had a couple of folks come to us on our platform and say, hey, we're getting a little annoyed by getting triggered alerts from Microsoft ASNs. If you're not familiar with autonomous system networks, IP blocks that Microsoft owns. So people assume they're inherently safe because Microsoft owns them. When in fact, that's one of the bigger breach things that we see as far as ASNs, because it's very easy to spin up an Azure VM and start doing low and slow attacks out of there. So we assume nothing is safe if the behavior is anomalous.
No, and that's a big attack vector that kind of really gained popularity last year, where they were the hackers were using legitimate resources to send that stuff out. So setting up a PayPal account and sending an invoice from PayPal so it looked more official, things like that.
Yep, exactly. So with that being said, what the ultimate question I'm asking here is, are you missing it? Are you missing some aspect of protecting your clients? And this is where I'm getting into that endpoint protection versus UBA, user behavior analysis. And if you remember that term getting a little bit popular like in 2016 and then dying off horribly, it's because people started to identify that UBA was important, or UEBA, depending on how trendy you are with your acronyms, which was user and entity behavior analysis. But there was no real tools that you could leverage to address security concerns that way. So there are now, which makes this a lot better for all of us. A couple of examples I can think of. This is literally my credit card statement. And the reason I bring it up, it's not very recent, it's from January. And I had to find a spot, there was nothing in there that I would be unwilling to admit to. So I had to go all the way back to January.
It's a lot of food. You're a hungry guy.
Hey man, we are out on the road so often that I just Uber eat stuff to hotels. I cook very rarely these days, but that being said, I don't look at this thing. I had to go figure out how to get it, sign in and pull it down. And the question I'm asking by doing this is, does anybody check this daily or weekly or monthly? Like most people pay the bill and they might scroll through it when they pay the bill. And that's true for Azure logs as well. If you're talking M365, it's true for logs in IT Glue and your VSA or RMM or whatever you use. You don't look at it. And because of that, those companies implemented these things. Hey, this is weird. We're on the hook if this is a bad charge. So we're going to double check with you before we allow you to do it. So you get those messages saying, did you approve this? So you say, yes. Okay, that was declined, to do it over, because they don't want to be responsible for it. And they're noticing people taking these actions. So why would you not do this with what's the lifeblood of your business, the data that you have residing inside of SharePoint or in your emails or Teams? We're doing the same thing with SaaS alerts. We provide graphical user interfaces and dashboards for visualizing data and identifying trends, reporting tools for investigating security incidents and supporting your audits. And we alert basically on the administrators on suspicious events in real time. The longest you will go getting an alert from SaaS alerts is 89 seconds. Whereas if you work with some of the SIMs and things like that are plugged into, I'm trying really hard not to name other vendors, work with some of the SIMs that exist out there, they do 4-hour snapshots of M365 and send you the logs every 4 hours. We actually had, I'm going to do it. It's a public thing. There's an article about it. There was an organization that had Arctic Wolf in place, which was doing a great job for them. However, they plugged SaaS alerts into a manufacturing company that had some federal contracts. And they noticed this weird behavior of these like SharePoint hits, where it was somebody internal sharing a SharePoint file. It was being downloaded in China, and then the share was being deleted immediately. Since the other tool they had in there triggered every 4 hours, it never saw any of those things. Because we log every single event that occurs, they saw them. They're like, that's weird. Why such a short share? And why are they always being downloaded from outside of an approved location? So they did a little bit more analysis on that individual's behavior. And it turns out that they had a foreign actor compromise a person that worked at the company. So the company now has the FBI involved, and I can't share any more than that. But we effectively caught a malicious foreign actor sharing documentation out from a manufacturing firm on government contracts.
Yeah.
So that's the piece that's missing, is really paying attention to what is going on, who's doing it, and then actually automatically remediating those things when we know it's a threat.
And you mentioned the graphical user interface here. Like one of the big pluses that I like, and you may have this in here already, is the map view of login.
Yeah, map's awesome. It's one of those things you're going to put like on a TV on the wall all the time, because it's got the little green and red dots and the little pan outs. Yeah.
And most of the stuff doesn't mean a whole lot to the end user, but that particular thing is a very impactful thing to show either a prospect or somebody that you're working with. Here's the things that we're monitoring for you and acting upon, and the visibility that we have into your system to give them that.
Yeah. It's one of those telling things, and it's the reason that everybody that's a seven-figure elite member uses this as part of the cybersecurity risk assessment. It's the front page of this user behavior anomaly piece where you say, hey, I know you think you're too small for anybody to give a crap about your data, but here's on a map where you're supposed to be, and here's the 87 login attempts from the tip of Russia all the way down to the tip of North Korea that have occurred in the past 2 weeks. They might not know how small you are, and they might be fine with just getting $5,000 from you. It's easier to get it from you than it is from an enterprise. You are currently being attacked. And I have yet to see one of those maps that's purely green. There's always somebody trying from somewhere.
Short of the tenant just got spun up.
Right, exactly. If you've never emailed anyone from your email address, maybe nobody knows it exists. Right. But outside of that, oh, I don't remember what the slide is. This should be fun. Oh, I do. I think I know what this is. Okay. So here's a fun example though. And this is a little bit of a shot at the whole SIM mentality where it's just here, we'll ticket you and let you know what's going on. Last year, a couple years ago, Samsung released a new refrigerator, and they were super proud of this function. It says it's so smart, it will ping your phone if you leave the door open. And the very first comment was, why the F doesn't it just close the door itself if it's so smart? And I loved that because if I put that back into the cybersecurity mentality, I don't need a ticket 5 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour after something bad happens. Just like I don't need to know 10 minutes after I left my house that I forgot to close the refrigerator door. Like, how is that helpful? Now I got to turn around, drive back home and close the damn door and be late for work, or let all of my stuff go bad in the refrigerator. All of those Uber Eats orders that I have packed in there. But this is what SaaS Alerts does. SaaS Alerts closes the door. It recognizes the failure, it recognizes the flaw, the thing that went wrong, and it remediates it automatically. So I'll give you like an example, a use case, a fully automated breach block inside of the Respond module. Basically, what we're looking at is a rule that can be established to set SaaS Alerts to monitor and automatically respond to a high confidence account breach event. So, and typically a lot of our guys use this after hours. Like if you don't have on-call techs after hours or a full SOC, you can set this up to run between like 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. If we see this behavior, take this action automatically. So this one, basically you go in and you say, hey, this is the customer I want to apply it to. If I see successful logins from unapproved locations after hours, throw a critical alert. You can text a technician if you want, but the action I want you to take is to force a log off of all of their active sessions and block feature sign-in. So it's the opposite approach of conditional access policies inside of Intune. So, and I have a little bit of a contentious point about conditional access policies. Ryan, let's see if you're aware or you agree with me on this one. Conditional access policies, and specifically geofencing, fires after a successful login. Mm-hmm. Doesn't look for it before then. So if you are an external attacker, let's say you're in Russia, and you go pop in and try to hit somebody's account over here, and you sign in with the creds that you phished or whatever, you're effectively telling them, hey, you have the right login, you have the right password, you just can't sign in from where you are. Yeah. Now move very quickly before you get tossed into a risky user bucket, but that's taken up to 4 hours in some scenarios for that thing to fire. So you've just basically said, hey, you're good to go. Now go see where that domain is registered, VPN into that area and sign in from there. And just do it quickly. If you got 15 minutes in there to damage something, that's plenty. Whereas the SaaS Alerts approach is, hey, you did have the right login, you did have the right password, you tried to sign in from somewhere you're not allowed to, now nobody gets to until a technician looks at it.
Right. And that can seem extreme, and maybe it is if there's a unique reason for it. Somebody went traveling and didn't tell you about it, but the alternative is way worse. I mean,
significantly.
Something like that happens and you weren't aware of it and it was an issue, you definitely want to be shutting that down right away.
Yeah, the 15-minute inconvenience of being locked out of your email because you forgot to tell your MSP you were going to Ecuador for vacation versus accidentally sending an attacker $18,000. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't even compare. And even in that first scenario, we've had that occur where it was a positive. Somebody called furious into the MSP because they were on vacation. They were trying to get something done and they couldn't. And they were like, yeah, we locked your account out because we were going to assume you were breached. You just signed in from Panama. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh, I'm in Panama. I didn't realize you guys could see that. So it was an educational moment for that customer. Like, no, I don't know what you think we do all day, but we're monitoring for anomalous behavior and trying to protect you. So next time you go out of the country, can you let me know and we can whitelist you out of this rule?
And they still forget, but I love those scenarios because it really shows your value. It gives you that opportunity for your value. And most of the time, even if they start the call, angry because they weren't able to access their system, they're like, oh, well, I didn't realize you were doing that, and I'm glad you are.
Yeah, you're welcome. Right.
And talking about your your geofencing example, we've actually seen that happen to where there was we got alerted of a login attempt. I want to say it was like Norway or something like that. Then they hit the geo block. They tried another country. Then they got to the U.S. and then they just started getting closer. Like we had things under control, and the MFA was there, and we were monitoring everything. But like over the course of, I think, as quickly as an hour, we just saw them attempting,
just narrowing it down to the area. Yep.
Yeah, so they're really and to your point about conditional access, I mean, I wouldn't turn off your geo policies, but they're not terribly effective anymore.
No, that's what I say they do is conditional access policies buy you time. They do not solve the problem.
Yep. And and you can get a lot fancier with conditional access policy. So again, with security, we're talking about layers all across the board, but the visibility point is so important, and I think it's something that especially people who are just getting into the security world aren't as keen on or don't think about as much. But you have to plan on any of the protection layers that you have in place, something getting by, and that's where identifying these things is so important, because you don't know. I mean, you could have all of these conditional access policies come up, and then there's some vulnerability that allows somebody to get past those. You need to know when that happens.
It's funny you mentioned that, and it's not in this presentation, and now I wish it was. There is this is weird if you guys are familiar with Reddit at all. You folks don't typically go onto Reddit to say nice things about vendors. That's not what it's for. We actually had.
That's true about any feedback from.
Yeah, if it's on Reddit, it's not a positive thing, typically, right? So we actually had somebody, I'm trying to find this real quick, so I'm stalling a little bit, that came in and said like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to do. I'm getting a little exhausted. I've got all of the ATP policies tuned up as high as I can get them. I've got everything configured right, and these stupid phishing emails are still getting through. And he actually says in a Reddit post, I caught both of them very quickly thanks to SaaS alerts. Thanks, SaaS alerts in parentheses. And then he carries on with his gripe. But it speaks to your point. Like, look, there's the whole point of the cybersecurity is to try to catch up with the people who are figuring out ways to get ahead of us. So we're almost always reacting. And you can't really react. Here's a fun analogy since I'm going down this rabbit hole. I think it was like 2017. The NFL implemented a rule against blindside blocking. They said it's unfair to hit a competing player when they can't see you coming. So they made that a rule. You're not allowed to do that. We unfortunately can't ask attackers to not hit us where we're not looking. Nobody's going to create that rule for us because it's illegal to steal people's shit, but you're still going to do it because you're a bad actor. So we have to instead just look everywhere. And this has been one of the biggest blind spots that our partners have had for several years.
And that's where, your example here for the configuration steps, with setting up this automatic reaction after hours. I mean, all of these big attacks that we typically see, how often are they happening on holiday weekends?
Oh, there's no eyes on glass. It's the perfect time. My favorite time to pull new reports and put them into my presentations is around the 4th of July and Christmas.
Yeah.
Those two, and actually New Year's Eve is a really, really good one too. But I like to pull those reports because you'll see there's one of the things, and it's not in this either. It's a little green line that shows you login activity, like a frequency of successful logins, and then the frequency of failed logins. And without fail, the Friday before the 4th of July weekend, that little red line spikes above that little green line.
Yeah.
That's everything.
That also reminds me, you had shown us some statistics and a graph just like that. Just after the Ukraine invasion.
Yes.
And like the activity that spiked, and looking at the comparisons between Russian-based attacks and then comparing them to China, which was
China and India. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could tell, because sometimes people question, like, okay, is it really that pervasive? Well, look how much it falls off when they're preoccupied with something else, and how somebody immediately fills the gap for you.
Yep.
So here's a UBA rule. This respond rule, because I know I got a little bit more I want to talk about here, and I'd love to keep talking freely throughout it. This respond rule takes no action whatsoever, but it does create a new event type for monitoring specific actions. So this is not like necessarily bad, but it's something you want to be aware of that it occurred. So this respond rule quite literally says, hey, if I see a couple of things happen in a row, it's a little bit more important than if just one of these things happened. So we're going to say, hey, for these customers, for these accounts, if anybody modifies the org security or promotes a user to admin or changes another account password, any of those any of those three things happen, set it as low and don't do anything about it. I just want to log that somewhere that those things occurred all at once. And you can do it in the reverse. You can say, I don't particularly care about people uploading a ton of stuff to SharePoint or viewing a bunch of stuff in SharePoint, but I do care deeply about people downloading and deleting things. So ignore these, but let me know if somebody goes and hits 15 files, pulls them all down, and then deletes them from SharePoint, because that is somebody who's about to quit and they're taking data with them.
Yep.
So we can keep logs of all that stuff. Nothing doesn't necessarily have to do anything about it, but make you aware via a ticket, or you can take the action of kicking them out.
And that's a really good example of one of those things that I think you guys provide as far as telemetry that a lot of the other monitoring platforms don't. And like I said, they're most often looking at those login events. And
identity access management's like the bread and butter, they think. Yeah.
But the data is so important, because that's going to be the thing that tips you off that something is going to happen when you can still have a reaction to it.
Yeah, it's also really good for initial configuration when you're setting up a user or you're setting up a new customer or a prospect, to go in, and we have a user detail report and an externally shared file report that will show you all of the external links to all of the documents that exist in their infrastructure, and if they're shared anonymously, if they have expiration dates, etc. And again, that's a report that I've never gone in and seen clean. Mm-hmm. People just don't understand how dangerous it is to send those orphan links out. Right. Saying, hey, here, I'll send you the link. And then that person sends the link to somebody else and that person loses track of it. Or one of those people in that chain gets breached. Now everybody has access to that. And there's really nothing you can do about it once it's out there. So running that report and saying, hey, here, this is bad practice. We're going to disable anonymous file sharing because this one's file name says invoice for so-and-so. I assume there's some information about that company in that doc. And now I have no idea who has it.
And sometimes it doesn't have to be nefarious. It could be somebody who's just not thinking and making a mistake, and bringing that type of alert to their attention or their supervisor's attention. There's a lot of value in that for your customer as an MSP.
Yeah, that's actually been the fun part, is every time I've done this and looked at those reports, none of it really stands out to me. But then when I go show it to a business owner, they're like, what the hell is he doing in that folder anyway? Like, why does he have access to that? Because that data means something to them. Yeah. So I bring that up and I'm like, is any of this weird to you? And they're like, yeah, a lot of that's weird to me. Why is she doing that? Why is she forwarding that to a personal email? Like, I'm like, all right, that conversation you can have when we get off the phone, but you had no idea this was occurring without this tool.
And sometimes that's the only time you can have that conversation. I mean, a lot of times when you start talking about access rights and whatnot, they're like, oh, just give them access to everything.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
They don't think about it. But then when you show them behavior, then it's like they start to get it.
Yeah, they start to wonder if maybe they've been a little loosey-goosey with their permissions. Mm-hmm. So we've made some other changes in the platform. If any of you guys are concerned or considering co-managed or trying to get your foot in the door with larger entities, we've implemented role-based access control. So anyone that has an internal IT that you might want to share this data with, you can quite literally go in and say, hey, I'm going to put you on this tool because we sell channel exclusive. You can't buy it. Nobody can buy us unless they're an MSP. So you can actually tell them like, hey, I'm going to let your internal IT guy see the alerts. They'll get sent to him. He can dictate what you guys do with those things, but they can only see their data. So you might have 50 organizations in there. Role-based access control will allow you to create a user and say, hey, you can only see this location. It might also help you with your tier 1 techs. Maybe you divvy out who they're supposed to play with and who they're supposed to talk to. You can give them access exclusively to the folks that they need to see, because to your point, we don't want to play too fast and loose with access. You can secure the data that comes out of SaaS alerts the same way.
But it's nice that you're leveraging that, because I think the co-managed scenarios are going to just become more and more prevalent, over the next couple of years.
Yeah, we should all be swimming upstream, trying to get our hands on bigger customers. So we want to make sure that we give you a tool that they can't get on their own without paying $9, $10. Like, there's some really cool tools out there that do what we do to some extent, but they sell direct and they are expensive as hell. Whereas we're less than $1 per user per month, like to the MSP. Most of our MSPs would charge between $3 and $6 for it. What else we got? Oh, this is another one that you guys tend to forget about, your end users, not you. Stale account cleanup. If you've got guest users or users that haven't signed in for a while, those are big old red flags if they're not being leveraged because they're ingress points. People are significantly more likely to click on something being sent from someone that is inside of their organization. And if their account that hasn't been used in a while, you can safely assume it's been a pretty static password for a while. And a lot of people just leave those out. It also costs you money. If you've got licensed users still sitting at M365 that nobody's using, you're paying for those every month. So we had implemented a feature in the account management where you can run this and say, hey, show me the accounts that are either guest users or licensed users who haven't signed in for the last 30, 60, 90 days. And right from SaaS alerts, put a little checkbox next to everyone that you know you don't need anymore and block sign in or delete the account. I actually lean delete the account on guest users because if somebody needs to invite them back, they can invite them right back. If you block them, the admin has to go in and unblock them. So, but it's a good practice, and the respond module allows you to set a schedule of how often you want to do that.
This is really handy for people who fail to let you know when people leave the organization as well. We've got a particular company that always forgets and lets us know like 3 weeks after the fact, and usually we're letting them know, hey, did this person is this person no longer there? Well in advance of them letting us know, oh yeah, we forgot. Yeah, we need to deactivate all of their other stuff.
While you were talking, I looked at the Q&A and somebody was surprised that I managed to only spend $14.98 at a liquor store.
That was the takeaway, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not quite sure. That must have been my girlfriend because I spend like $80 every time I go. But that's the question I've received so far.
You were already stocked up before that snapshot happened.
Yeah, it must have been like I needed a mixer to go with it or something. But no, that is very handy. It's a very valid point because a lot of folks don't tend to pay attention to those things. We actually had another scenario that came across where we bill for everything that's sign and enabled. So when I told you that price point, I think we're around like 80 cents a user. I'm not in sales. We bill for everything that has sign and enabled, not guest users because they're not really sign and enabled per se, but we do monitor them. Yes. But we had somebody call us and say, hey, this organization only has 362 employees or something like that. Why did we get billed for 478 for these folks? And I was like, well, let's go take a look. So we looked in the org and they had a bunch of shared mailboxes. And I was like, well, they're all signed and enabled. So we're gonna monitor them. And he's like, if you're telling me that I'm getting billed for shared mailboxes because sign in is enabled, that actually chills me to my core. And I was like, why? We need to monitor them. Somebody could log in to that. He's like, no, not because of you, because that means our practices have not been followed and we're not blocking sign in on shared mailboxes. He's like, I did not know that. I was like, well, you're welcome. We figured it out now. Let's go fix it before something bad happens. Because again, a shared mailbox doesn't have MFA on it and it has a static password.
And I think there's a lot of people out there who don't even realize that.
No, and what's annoying is Microsoft actually says best you need to disable sign in once you're done doing your stuff. They don't do it for you.
Right.
They have it buried in one of their KBs that you should definitely do it, but they don't. And we actually did have one example, a respond rule fired and stopped it, but this one was like in November, so it's not as fresh and exciting, where a CFO got an email from a conference room saying that the time that he picked wasn't available and to sign in and pick a different time. And it was exactly the scenario we're talking about, where it was a resource account that had sign in enabled, had a static password. Somebody got into it and somebody started sending emails out to people that were booked on the calendar, asking them to authenticate, pick another time. Now, the email that was kind of cool, and they actually sent us a screenshot of this, was an update from them to, I don't remember who it was, about a vendor changing the payment method. And they had gotten about the subject line, updating vendor payment method, and good more before they got kicked out. And we showed that to them, and he was like, I'm not going to lie to you. If that email would have been sent, I would have updated the payment information. So
that kind of honesty is a little refreshing.
Yeah, it was a little nice. He's like, look, if he sent it to me, I'm just going to do what he told me to do.
Right.
So we're like, all right, well, good thing the respond module is in there.
Right. And speaking of the respond module, we got a question. Can SaaS alerts block sign in for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm assuming that's in context to the account management thing. Yes, it can. So you can literally set the respond module to run every day and look for folks that haven't signed in for the past 30 days and just automatically block sign in. Or if it's a guest user, delete the user account. For the shared mailboxes, we could, but I'd be a little cautious about that because people don't really have typical like naming conventions for shared mailboxes all the time. It might be a guy that was fired. It might be marketing at, et cetera. We'll surface the ones that people aren't signing into that are shared mailboxes, but we'll usually leave it to you to check the box next to it and say block sign in.
But that's a feature of Respond too. So you can set a bunch of different criteria and have that be the action that occurs as well. So there's a lot of variety that you can do. And that's one of the things I like about the Respond module is it's so customizable to whatever scenario you need to apply it to.
And here's me oversharing. Again, we have this product release April 19th, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what we're doing, but I am going to tell you
You're going to
that
slip up a little bit though.
I'm gonna F this up a little bit. Yeah. I'm gonna tell you that one of the things that we are adding in order for it to get accomplished required us to allow regular expressions to be leveraged inside of Respond. So now you can pick apart certain things that have occurred in an account and build rules based on just the logs that come through, which means a lot more granularity. You can say, hey, if this happens, but there's not the words outside of an approved location in the alert, I don't care. If this happens and it is outside of an approved location, I care deeply. If a mailbox was converted and an email forwarding rule was set and then this happens, then I care. Unless it's this person, or this person. You can actually get super granular in how you have Respond, answer, and resolve things. We're becoming an antivirus or a SOAR for less than $1 that somebody can use against a SaaS platform, which is unique and incredible.
And another thing that I like about the platform is because it is so robust, it can be, a little bit overwhelming at first. But you guys have a list of I don't want to call them best practices, but like a bunch of examples.
Our templates, yeah.
You have gotten, and these templates were built both internally and from feedback from users too. So that's extremely helpful because I've gone through those and gone, oh wow, I didn't think about that. That's really useful. So I think that's extremely helpful as well.
My favorite one, and it might show what a giant nerd I am, is still the break glass account rule that one of the guys came up with, where he's like, he has to have them because he's got some SSO stuff set up. So like, what is it called? Escalated privilege accounts or break glass accounts. Effectively a static account with a very, very, very long password that cannot have MFA enabled. And no one should really ever be using unless it's dire circumstances. So he built a rule inside of our platform that says if anybody ever signs into that, regardless of where they are or who it is, kick them out and block sign in again. Because what he's doing there is saying, in order for you to use that account, not only do you have to know the login and password, but you also have to be a SaaS Alerts admin because you have to go into SaaS Alerts, turn off that rule, then go use the account.
Yep.
I thought that was like super clever. I was like, damn, you guys think of things that I never would have thought
of. So SaaS Alerts becomes the glass, and then the
correct
SaaS account becomes the thing behind the glass.
Yep, exactly. I thought that was neat. And we're burying a little bit of our exciting other things here because we keep talking about M365. But we actually support a ton of stuff. So we've got Google Workspace covered as well. Now, keep in mind the Respond module, some of the capabilities of blocking sign-in and retiring sessions, all that stuff right now is exclusive to Microsoft. We're working on adding it to others. But as far as the alerts and the quick ticketing and the real-time stuff like that, or even leveraging to some extent to Respond to let you know when specific things happen, those exist for pretty much all of these, including MSP tools. And as an MSP, we don't charge for your domain. So when you sign up to use our platform and you set up your own M365 and your IT glue and your VSA or Automate or whatever, those aren't billable users. Those are included in the offering, which is really cool because we want you guys to be able to say we care enough about cybersecurity that we do it. And that's why we're going to do it for you as well.
And I think it's really important too. Just looking at IT Glue, for example, how many keys to the castle exist in that platform? So just having that type of visibility on something like that, which then brings me to my next question. I don't know if you've got any that you're allowed to talk about, any new platforms that you're going to add to the system. I know we're talking about IT Glue. Hoodoo's another popular documentation platform. I don't know if there's any plans for that in the near future.
So with the cautionary statement that we will always be limited by what the APIs provide, by the second half of the year, we will have something in place that will allow us to add anything that's SaaS-based within a business week.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's all I'm going to say about that one too.
we keep trying to bait you a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I feel like a little bit more than you're letting on, and you're trying to lead me into saying it.
That one I did not. Sometimes I'll pull that trick. We've got another question from the group here as well.
I think I answered that one because I think that's what he's leading into is what about DocuSign and things like that.
Yep.
I will tell you as an example, DocuSign is not one of them. There are some things that I know you guys would like that will never happen. Good example is QuickBooks. QuickBooks Online, their API is so dismal. All it really tells you is that someone signed in, not from where, not who it was. So we can't do anything with people that are behind closed doors like that. But it's very uncommon in our space to have vendors that don't open up their API or webhooks so that you can ingest data.
And the other thing too is, if it's a platform that allows you to do SSO, that's going to give you some visibility then through something like the
Yes,
Microsoft.
because we pull OAuth for everything. So if you're having people use their OAuth through Google Workspace or Microsoft, we'll tell you every time they use that for a foreign application or another website or device. So you'll see who's using it and what they're using. The ability to tell you what they did inside of it right now is most robust inside of these ones. IT Glue being a considerably big one, considering the keys of the kingdom are in there.
Right.
Now I have two more slides. I think the next one is a pricing one. I'm kind of going to blow past it though, because if you guys aren't a member of Seven Figure MSP, the elite members, if you aren't, that might apply to you, this one. But if you're a Seven Figure elite member, we give away the first 100 seats for free to members, and the onboarding is included. If you're not, and you're curious about checking this out, there's a minimum through us of 500 licenses at 80 cents. All the things that I mentioned, the respond module, the monitoring, the reporting, they're all included, and the onboarding is included as well at no cost. But if you're on the fence about getting a little bit more involved with Seven Figure MSP, we are not the only vendor that goes well out of our way to treat those guys better. So please do.
I mean, some of the discounts essentially pay for the membership.
They more than pay for the membership. I've seen some of the other discounts people are giving away, and we are definitely not even the best in that regard. But I don't, I'm not here to tout Seven Figure. I'm not selling you guys if I'm not selling me. I will tell you that if you guys do decide that you are interested in taking a look at it and you're curious about what it's going to look like, we are doing a lunch and learn that's exclusive to Seven Figure folks. I don't even know if you knew that. We just started this. You see the name there, Alex Hannah. Her email address, if you want to pop it in there for me, Ryan, is alexandra@saasalerts.com. So anyone that's on this call that might be interested in being a part of that or signing up for SaaS Alerts and kicking the tires on it, please reach out to alexandra@saasalerts.com and she will point you in the right direction. And I've got one other thing, and then we'll sit on this slide and talk for however long we have.
Okay.
We have an MSP community that is not exclusive just to our members. So if you have an idea of how this could be better, or you think of a question as soon as we hang up, we would strongly encourage all of you guys to join us. It literally just ended today before we got on this one, but it's a hosted event. We have an external monitor and moderator who actually talks through the questions, bring things that he's found from the space. And there's no sales tactic because it's mostly people who use SaaS Alerts. But you get to, air it out, ask questions, hear from some MSPs how they're using it, and get some ideas on how maybe you could. This one actually turned into like a 20-minute session of telling us what we could be doing differently as far as how to respond tickets into the PSA. And those are pretty much the only time I can get my CTO, my VP of Dev, and my CEO all in the same room at the same time to listen to feedback. So I would thoroughly encourage any of you are interested, please join us.
And that's one thing I did want to highlight about you guys as well, if you didn't mention it, is how community driven you guys are. One thing that's kind of a thing in the channel with a lot of particularly the larger vendors, everybody has feature requests, and they take MSP input and things like that. A lot of times those feature requests just sit there and they never get looked at. You guys pride yourselves on being community built. I mean, a lot of the features and innovations have come from ideas that the MSPs have brought out. I mean, just that list of respond options alone is a really good example.
Yeah, it is. It's a big part, and I think a lot of that comes from who founded this company. I mean, you've got the CEOs, 3 CEOs of MSPs who moved on into the vendor space, but our CEO, Jim Lippy, the CEO of Thrive Networks for the longest time, sold was it not Thrive? I'm sorry. Whatever, the one that sold the Staples, can't remember. The CEO of Thrive and their members are some of our biggest partners. Excuse me for using Thrive when that wasn't correct. And they helped us build a lot of those rules. We've got massive venture-backed MSPs, and then we've got little ones that are with us on this call every week, throwing out like, hey, this is how we should be doing things. This is what would help us sell the product. This is what would make my one technician who is stressed to all hell feel better if we had it. And we take those things because we know how important that is. Chip Buck, our CTO, same thing, in the space for forever. That's just the way that the product's been built from the ground up.
Yep. No, it's awesome, and I like working personally with organizations that are like that. They take that feedback because everybody's got their own needs. I think especially from a security perspective too. a lot of people are just starting to get into this and realize that security is something that needs to be done now. And a lot of that space is just kind of figuring itself out. All of the RMMs basically do the same thing. Security vendors all over the place. So the more input that you take from the community to build that out, it's going to just, it works better for you, obviously, but for the MSPs as well, because they're getting something that does the things that they need to do in the trenches every day.
It's what we want to be. And again, we think we did it at the right time. And what I'm liking, and this might sound weird coming from a vendor, is I'm liking how many other vendors and partners I'm seeing come into this space. And you might like, if you think you're selling something unique, you might not like the idea that somebody else is catching up or trying to catch up or getting it or trying to swim in the same pool as you. We kind of personally love it because it's highlighting the urgency of this. The more people start paying attention to it, the more people are like, oh, damn, SaaS Alerts was right 26 months ago when they started this. This is the way the world is going. So I'm excited to see some new announcements coming from some of the other vendors around that they're going to try to do a better job at monitoring and securing SaaS applications.
Well, and it drives innovation. I think the other thing, and Chris and I talked about this on a webinar that we did yesterday. A lot of the tools have different value adds and overlap and different things like that. At the end of the day, you got to figure out what combination of tools work best for you in the way that you deliver services. And it doesn't mean that one vendor is better or worse than another. One just may fit your philosophy better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think having those other tools out there, aside from just the obvious of driving innovation, is good. And to see, that's one thing I think within our community and the seven-figure community that I think is a real value is the way that the members work together, which is kind of counterintuitive to what you see a lot of MSPs in traditional means do. Everybody's the competition, but we also see that with the vendors. So like, we've seen vendors, partner up and take those good services that they provide and combine them into something that is even more helpful for the members. So I really appreciate that.
We have a couple, and anybody that is actually seven-figure elite has been to a meeting before, actually been to an event before, will know this. There's a product in that space called Augment that a lot of people assume we compete with. So we've actually taken together to get into getting up on stage and be like, hey, real quick, guys, we're not competitors. Like, you got to stop looking at us this way. Augment does a phenomenal job of helping you get yourself configured properly in the beginning. And that's where they stop and where SaaS Alerts starts. But because at the end, what we are looking for is to help make sure you have an inclusive stack of everything that's going to cover what you need. And by the way, this is not a zero-sum game. As an MSP or as a vendor, the more options we have, the better we all are. And just because you give somebody advice and their business gets better, it doesn't mean they stole your client. It's a big enough pool for us to all swim in and make sure we're all taking care of each other.
It definitely is. And speaking of events, I think we're going to see you in Nashville.
Yes, I am mandated. I can't
you
get away with it
as well.
Sorry, again?
You personally are going to be there?
Yeah, I'll be there. Myself and Alexandra Hanna, who is the seven-figure account manager. So I'm pretty sure everybody that's part of the group knows her already, but we'll both be there.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good time. So if you're watching and you're thinking about seven-figure or just looking for a good excuse to go out and have a good time and maybe learn a little bit about IT, come join us in Nashville. You'll find details on that all over Facebook. So if you're looking for them, if you need any help, let me know. But live.sevenfiguremsp.com for some more information on that as well.
I'll go a step further. If you're seriously considering doing it and you do see a value in SaaS Alerts, still reach out to Alexandra at SaaSalerts.com. Let's get you set up on a trial. If you guys decide we're a good fit for you, we'll help you get to the seven-figure event.
You know people who know people.
I know a guy and a gal. We'll figure it out, but we'll help you get out there if you're not a member and you're thinking about becoming one.
Awesome. Only the last question we have in here isn't really a question. It's a well done, guys. Great presentation. So
is that from somebody that likes us? That's David. Okay.
David Rose.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. That wasn't planted. Cool. Any parting little tidbits of knowledge for us?
No, I don't. No, I wasn't prepared for that. I was going to make a joke and then I decided not to.
You sure? Well,
yeah, I'm positive. That's being recorded.
You backed up too far now.
I did. All right, awesome. My friend, it was good talking to you, Ryan, and I can't wait to see you. I hope this was a valuable use of everyone's time that joined us.
I certainly think it is. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, we've got the contact information for Alexandra. Feel free to reach out to either of us on Facebook. Probably not too difficult to find. We'll get you set in the right direction. But I appreciate the time, Ryan. Good talking to you as always. We'll see you in Nashville. And I'm sure we'll probably talk to you before then.
Yes, sir. Talk soon.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.